During these times, we're all in this together, and we want to remain positive. Thus, being good servants, wanting to keep our social distancing, we're going to share with you some of the best episodes of A Server's Journey. If you've heard these episodes before, well, this could be a good reminder. But thanks for being a loyal listener to A Server's Journey. This is the Servers Radio Network. Welcome to A Server's Journey with Rocky DeStefano. The foundation of the program is everyone's leading something or someone, and thus the name of the program is A Server's Journey.
Good morning, Larry. I hope you're well today and healthy, which is what we all want.
I don't have my mask on, but I am in front of the microphone.
That's right, and we are suitably far apart, so we are keeping the correct social distancing. Larry does that anyways, even before everything happened. He preferred to be far away from me.
I'm in the underground broadcast studio bunker, completely away from everybody.
Well, Larry, as always, I thank you for helping us here, and I appreciate everybody who listens in every week and comes along on this journey with us. I hope you're getting benefit from it, and we appreciate you guys.
You know, today's guest, Rocky, is one of the hardest working persons I know.
Yeah, he's pretty extraordinary.
You know, he's created and brought more people together than I know, and he does it with a sense of community.
Yes.
And he's Chris, can you say his last name?
Well, so I had to write this down, and now I'm going to mispronounce it. Chris Krimitsos, which is a wonderful Greek name. And as an Italian, I appreciate great names.
Well, he created Podfest, and that's the reason we're here. And since that time in I always want to say 19, it's 2015.
I know.
That's been just 5 years ago. He started this Podfest, and it's grown into an international organization to thousands of people attending.
From all over the world.
From all over the world, yes. I met someone from Colombia when I attended the last time. And Kenya.
There you go.
Yeah. So I'm all over the world. So, hey, do we have some comments coming in on social media?
Yeah, and I do want to thank everybody who takes the time to rate us, to give us reviews on any of our social media platforms or on any of the pod platforms. We got a couple comments. One was from Michael Leslie, who recommended A Server's Journey podcast. And his comment is, wonderful nuggets of aha moments, bingo. And we appreciate, Michael, the fact that you're listening. We love the fact that I don't know who you are, and for some reason you wandered upon our show, but we do appreciate the comments, and we do ask, and I know, Larry, you share this, please let us know what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, what you want to hear. Give us ideas, because we're always open to change.
Well, speaking of social media, we wanted to thank ACS Creative for helping us develop our website.
Yeah, it's a very robust. They did a wonderful job with it, and they really took over and helped us with a part of our business that we don't really have any expertise in.
It's called aserversjourney.com if you haven't been there. So when it comes to creating a website, it pays to go to the pros, and that's why we went to ACS Creative. They do brochures, logos, direct mail campaigns, ad campaigns, and websites. And
they don't play games with your money, Larry.
Contact ACS Creative. That's ACS Creative on the internet. Epic moments in leadership. Well, I've got a quote for you today.
All right.
As an epic moment in leadership. Lately, I've been looking at Paul Harvey. Do you remember Paul Harvey, who was a radio commentator for many years?
Fantastic. In fact, I think he's got a audio clip that has been just consistently reshared and reposted. One of the greatest, maybe, clips of all times.
Yeah. Well, here's a quote from Paul Harvey. He said, "No government in history ever gave its citizens what hardworking Americans with their sleeves rolled up have earned for themselves." You can see he's kind of like anti-government.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't say I blame him.
So let's get to the meat of the show today, Rocky. Rocky, you know, the reason why you have over 200 episodes of A Server's Journey is because of our guest today.
Yes,
You know,
for sure.
As we mentioned in the intro of the program, Chris created Podfest in 2000 or 1959.
Well, I don't know that he was.
Yeah, he's not that old.
Well, I can tell you, Chris, I want to thank you because we were lucky enough to go to some of the first Podfest, and honestly, we didn't really know what we had. We started this program internally for my leadership at my Chick-fil-A's, and then people started listening, which was kind of a unique thing. But we definitely learned quite a lot from you guys and from the collection of people that you bring together. So it's a wonderful thing you guys do.
I appreciate that, Rocky. We are in the hospitality industry, and we're there to serve our attendees, and I really appreciate that feedback.
So what was the reason you created Podfest?
Well, before Podfest, I created, in my late 20s, I was really good at making money, but I was not fulfilled. So I set out on a journey. I had about 6 months of, I was very fortunate. I had money and time. And I call it my period of standing in the silence. And I'd go for walks every day. And I'd ask myself, if you could paint anything in your life or create anything, what would it be? And I came up with, I'm really good at connecting people and helping them find resources and succeed. So I said, I would love to create communities. And I intentionally then set out to create a business community in Tampa Bay, Florida. I did that for 9 years, 2,000 events. From that, there was, we had a gentleman that taught a meetup. His name is Steve Cherubino, talk about podcasting. And that's what launched Podfest, because I said, this is great. I went home, I said to my wife, we got to start podcasting. It's a phenomenal thing.
Did you know did you know what Podfest or
Podcasts were?
Thank you.
I did, because in 2009, like I was one of those early adapters. I loved the internet from '96 when you used to dial up, and I would just go to different websites. Like I'd go look at a website with pictures from Greece, and I'm like, this is going to revolutionize the world. So when it comes to tech, I'm a very I'm not a techie. Yeah, I'm not a techie person. In other words, I don't take to the technology as easily as some people that like to figure stuff out. But I take to the concept, and that's really, if you could take to the concept and then find your Wozniaks, you could get to wherever you need to go. So I'm always good at finding guys to help me along the way, and gals. My wife is very techie. So long story short, I was playing around with Ustream, which was one of the first streaming services back in the day after the military kind of released it. And in 2009, we were teaching social media. In 2010, I brought in Gary Vaynerchuk to speak. No one knew who he was. So like we were always ahead of the curve when it came to that stuff. So when podcasting came around, it wasn't like I didn't know what it was, because I used to do live TV shows. What I loved about the on-demand audio revolution is there was an audience hungry and there wasn't enough content at the time. And that, I saw that opportunity. So my wife started Biz Women Rock, which was one of the first ever podcasts for business women. And I supported her as her marketing manager, and I got her to #1 in the rankings back then. We would do all kinds of stuff to get rating and reviews and, subscribers. But in the process, I wound up teaching like 10 different classes all around the Tampa Bay area. And I said, from those classes, about 20, 30 people started their podcast as well. And they all started hitting it big too. So I was like, oh, wow, this is exactly what I thought. We tested it out. And that's when we started a meetup for the podcasters. And then we said, let's start a group. And we started the Florida Podfest, basically conference. And then we said, you know what? We invited all these people from out of state and none of them came. And I said, how come you're not coming to Florida Podfest? They go, well, it's for Floridians, and I live in Ohio, or I live in, California. I said, if I took the name Florida off, would you guys show up? And the one guy looked at me really puzzled. And I said, I kind of laughed to myself. I'm like, I'm taking the name Florida off. I'm just calling it Podfest. And the next year, everybody we invited from out of state showed up. And that was the year 2. And then each and every year it doubled. So as Podfest grew, my background is in media. I sold the Tampa Bay business owners, and I doubled down and focused on Podfest. So I'm a guy that's really good at business, that enjoys community building. So that's kind of my calling.
Yeah, it's amazing to me too. I've heard this story. In fact, we've heard that story a lot on this show, where people are having success as they define success maybe in their teens and 20s, but they were hungry for a different type of success. And we hear this term community over and over again. So it kind of sounds like you've really found your niche.
Yeah, I mean, I intentionally created this. So I know Rocky and Larry, you guys have experienced it, but you have to imagine, like, in my day-to-day life, when people are like, what do you do? Yeah. And I tell them I run a podcasting conference. They want to loan me money because they feel bad. You know, do you need some food to eat? I'm like, well, it's pretty big. But until they experience it, they don't really understand what I do. So like you said, I intentionally created this. I do believe I'm in the hospitality industry. My job is to serve my audience and to create connections. Now, there is a huge difference a small difference in Podfest from Tampa Bay business owners. Tampa Bay business owners, we used to screen anyone that would apply. So you were not allowed to join if you had a negative attitude. You had to have a positive mental attitude. And I know that sounds very hairy-fairy, but we would interview people. It would be a 1 to 2 hour interview, and we would listen to their language. Podfest is open to the public, so we have to figure out how to reinforce the community and the culture without doing the screening process. What happens, as you guys have seen, the culture has already emblazoned itself, so now the community protects itself from that. But we're open to everybody, which is a different dimension of what I'm doing on the community side. Yeah,
and I do think what I've noticed about fellow podcasters, they tend to be honestly more upbeat. Well, I guess there's several types, but the majority I meet are very upbeat, very positive people. You do have the conspiracy theorist and so forth, and
No, most of them, we call them messengers. They have a message and they want to help a community. So you're 100% right. So we lucked out in that there's a giver's gain that goes through the entire medium, and that's the connecting thread.
When you talk about building community, what was the story with the Kenya connection with you? You had an event at Podfest, and Kenya was represented. Tell the story about that.
So Heidi Totten, who is out of Utah, I do a lot of conferences. So I sponsor a lot of conferences, and I meet a lot of great people for Podfest. At one of the conferences, one of the guys like, hey, listen, I'm working for this. I'm helping this nonprofit, and I'm like, they're on their board. And I'd love if, his name is Alan. He goes, I'd love if you could help us. And I go, well, I do Power Days once a month, and I cherry pick who I work with. Let me know if that's open. He goes, yeah, we're really limited. I said, I'll tell you what, December is Christmas, and I will contribute my Power Day to your charity, and you get everybody on, and I'll help you guys out. And Heidi, this lady that created this amazing charity that goes to the Masai Mara in Kenya, she was on the call, and I was helping them strategize kind of a new media approach of how to get the word out. And while we were on the call, she got a message via Skype, and this is the global world we live in, that they just struck water in the community that she was working in. And she started crying. And I said, are you okay? And she goes, you don't understand. If we struck water, that means this whole community is going to change. So they don't have to walk, because water becomes, as we've seen all these specials, everything people do is to go get water all day. It's like a 4-hour journey on their heads and all this. And she really impacted me. And I said, you know what, Heidi? I said, if you guys would like, I'd love to contribute a booth at Podfest for you and your cause. And she goes, well, see if Moses could come. I said, Moses is their lead in the Masai Mara. He's part of the tribe in Kenya. I said, I mean, you don't have to go that far, but if you'd like to, I mean, it would be great for me as a promoter. She goes, no, I think he'd like it. And they literally had Moses fly in from Kenya. And they just had the most amazing thing. What she's doing is she's teaching the communities there to have a sustainable business ecosystem so they could help each other when they're gone. And the women in those groups, in those tribes, are really what hold it together. They're the workers. The men are not as, they don't work as much. They rely on the women. And then they're also stopping female mutilation from education. It's a really amazing work. And then she takes people, like people from I said, listen, I'm sure someone in our group will want to go do it. So you wind up getting this amazing trip. You go out there, you do work, but you also, half of it is almost like a vacation where you get exposed to the Masai Mara, and they show you stuff no one else would ever show you while you're out there. So it's an amazing story. And they just, we were so grateful that they were able to make it out and that we were able to expose them to our community and kind of pay it forward, because that's part of what Podfest is about.
What's the name of the organization?
It's 100 humanitarians. Thank you, Larry. That's 100 humanitarians.
Now, Rocky, you did a trip to Kenya, didn't
Yeah,
you?
we did one with a group called 410 Bridge, and it's a similar ideology where they're really trying to change the culture of the community first by water and the basic necessities. But once they get those, then they really try to help them with upstarts. And, it's amazing to see the power of, 1/3 of the community starting a business changes the entire community, all around. It's a truly amazing thing to witness.
Now, another story that was just mind-blogging that you presented at Podfest this last year. The story of a Podfester from Ocala, Florida, I believe, right? And they're working on some amazing things. Can you give us a little background on that story?
Yeah, so William Howell does STEM Talk, and he showed up, I think, 3 years ago at Podfest, and he happened to say to me in the hallway, he goes, "Listen, man, I really love what you're doing. I am part of a research facility, and we do all the stuff that you see in the news, like future stuff. And kind of like I told you guys, I love technology. So I said to him, I would love to come visit you." He goes, "Well, that invite is open." He goes, "You come visit me anytime." They have a research center in Ocala, but they're based out of Pensacola. So for those of us that live in the lower part of Florida, I guess, Pensacola is not that close.
It's not very convenient, yes.
Yeah, I think all of us would say we'd rather drive to Jacksonville and like Georgia on that side than Pensacola, only because it's like 7 hours around
Right.
the bend.
Yeah, you hit
and
that.
It feels like forever.
Yep.
So long story short, I said to him, "I'm going to arrange a speaking gig there, and I'll come hang out with you after." So I arranged a speaking gig just to see him, just so I could do a dual trip. I was an hour late. Luckily for me, the time changed, so I was on time.
You're right.
And I left at like 3 a.m. So I still underestimated it was a morning meeting. So long story short, I get there right on time, thanks to the time difference. Pensacola is a different time zone than the rest of Florida. And I go to his research facility, and I got to find the call letters, but he hosts a show called STEM Talk, which is the #1 science technology podcast in the world.
Yes, I've listened to it, actually. It's a great show.
Yeah, and he represents, let me see, I'm looking up the thing while I tell you the story. So he hosted me there, and we show up there, and he's got computers that are in gold. And he goes, "These are NASA gold." I go, "I don't know what that means." He goes, "Well, anything that NASA creates, the computers have gold, so you know what they create based on the gold on the thing." So they had all these robots that were basically exoskeletons for people that are paralyzed, and it was pretty crazy. The research facility is IHMC, and that's ihmc.us. So I said to William, I said, "This is amazing." He goes, yeah, we have Mark here. Mark is paralyzed, and we've created an exoskeleton, and he just competed in the first exoskeleton games. And
Wow.
I said, yeah. So I said, "Are you kidding me?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Mark, how did you find this opportunity?" He goes, "Well, they put an ad out on the paper, and I answered the ad." I was like, "Really? Like that?" They found a guy, they found their candidate, and he was crippled through a car accident. And I said, "How do you feel about walking?" He goes, "Oh, I'll walk again." He goes, they're making it possible for myself to walk again. So before this year's Podfest, William calls and he says, "Chris, we're preparing for the next competition. We're competing against Toyota and all these big companies. So I'm not going to be able to make it to Podfest. I really want to be there, but I just can't make it." And then he calls me like a week later. He's like, "Listen, this coronavirus thing is like making a dampener on things." He goes, "What if we came down and we had Mark walk in an exoskeleton, and it'll actually help us promote what we're doing?" I said, "Absolutely." Then he calls me back again. He goes, "Chris, I talked to our lawyers. They're not going to let us take out the exoskeleton and walk him across the stage at Podfest." Which honestly, it's like I could see that, right? Here's this one of a kind piece of equipment. They're going to go play with it in front of a bunch of podcasters.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like the Tesla truck when he tried to break the window.
Yeah. So I said, "Okay." He goes, "But I got something better." I go, "Mark," I go, "Bill," William would call him Bill. I go, "Bill, what's better than him in an exoskeleton, a la RoboCop walking across the stage?" He goes, "We planted electrodes in his spine and in his legs, and we could make him stand up." I'm like, "Get out of here."
Oh my gosh.
He goes, "Yeah, no, seriously." I said, okay, then you're going to be the centerpiece of the whole event. Kind of like Larry said, and we teased this. I'm so glad everybody stayed in the room. I said on Saturday morning, you do not want to leave before lunch because we're going to have a medical miracle in front of everybody. Luckily, a lot of people trusted me and they stayed because I know most of them were itching to go to the trade show and get their treasure map signed. And Mark gets there in his wheelchair and they hit the button and he literally stands up in front of everybody. I mean, you could see grown men with tears in their eyes. And then we ask him, do you think you'll ever walk? He goes, I'm already there. He goes, I'm on my way. He goes, I'll be walking thanks to these guys. Man. It was a miracle moment that you wouldn't expect to get in any conference, let alone a podcasting conference. And that's the power of community. That's where community trumps content. You can't buy that moment. That's the relationship I created with Will when he invited me out to Pensacola. I took him up on that offer, and that built a relationship that allowed him and Mark to come and do that for us.
But I love your wording, your choice of wording as far as messengers, because I think the pod community is such a different community in that there's thousands upon thousands of people with a message, and they're all different, but almost all of them are geared toward creating this community and getting the information out to people that wouldn't normally get it. So like something like this, where you've got somebody who has STEM talk sitting next to a person who does a business show, sitting next to a person who does a show on, how to properly breed horses, and yet they're all in this community together.
Yeah.
It can be a beautiful thing. And I think in society today, as we get further and further into technology, the one fear is we lose that community. So anything that we can do to get back into it, and I think what you're doing is, like, I was amazed every time I go to, Podfest, I'm amazed at the diversity of the people. And yet I can walk up to anybody and talk to anyone within a few moments, just asking a few key questions because we're part of a community.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, Rocky, because I brought that up on stage. I go, guys, you don't know if William's sitting next to you as you're sitting in this audience. You don't know who's next to who. And it's that cross transfer of information that creates a different world that we live into. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Now, the end of each Podfest, there's something that happens that just blows my mind. And you invite the participants who want to come up on stage to give a 30-second gratitude message. How did you come about that? That is fantastic.
Year 2. So the first year we had a great time. And the second year we said, let's create it into a 2-day extravaganza. So year 2, we had everybody that was visiting us. We had dinner the night before. Then the next day we had Podfest, and then we took everybody to a restaurant out on the water. It was kind of ironic because it was, February, and we were freezing our butts off. Because in Florida, as you know, there's some days where it's cold.
Right.
It was cold, and we had planned this beautiful thing out on the beach, but we bonded actually because of that, and we laughed and we had a good time. So by the time year 2, that event was over, we had shared so many moments that I saw. We had one guy that was a former captain of like a boat, really grizzled. And I saw tears forming in his eyes. And I said, it didn't feel right to just say, okay, guys, go home. And I said, organically, Larry, I put the mic out on the front of the stage. And I said, it was only like 180 of us. But at the time, by day 2, there was like 110, 111 of us left. And I said, hey, guys, if anyone wants to come up here and share what you're grateful for, come on up to the mic and feel free to share. And no one came up, but I could tell people wanted to come up. And then I said the immortal words that gave birth to the gratitude ceremony. I said, many of you are thinking that what you have in your mind is probably not worthy of saying, but you still want to say it. So why don't you not cave into that excuse and come on up? All of a sudden, the whole room lined up. We found a second mic. We put 2 mics on there, or maybe it was 1. I don't remember too well, but I remember that people started coming up and they were thanking the other person, and no one wanted to leave. That's what I remember, and that became a tradition, and it's grown since. Now people, know it's time. Next year, we're playing around with having a gratitude booth to record them in real time and then create a video and then It'll be more of a lottery to save us time, only because we're such a grateful community that we could do it for 2 hours. So we want to just perfect it, and then people could go to the gratitude booth in the trade show and in real time tell us what they're grateful for, and then we could edit it into this beautiful piece and then allow maybe 20 or 30 people to go up on stage. But the story, Larry, I don't know if you caught the story. The one with Maxwell Ivy really took me aback. So he's the blind blogger. He became blind in his 20s, so he doesn't get around that well because he was an adult and then went blind. So he's still learning. He gets around, but not as well as people that have been blind since they were children. So he gets up there and he goes, coming to Podfest has changed. You don't realize the impact that certain things have. But last year when he came to Podfest, he didn't have money, so we made sure he had a room. I basically covered it with my team, and I made sure that he was accommodated. And that changed his mindset. So whenever someone invited him to a conference, he would then say yes and figure out how to get there throughout the year, he told us. But the thing I didn't realize is our treasure maps are physical pieces of paper. He said, I'm blind. He goes, there's no way I'm going to know which booth to go to and how to fill out a treasure map in a trade show. He goes, but I trusted in Chris and I trusted in Podfest. So he went into the trade show, and Rocky, he said that after he would talk to a booth, they would take him by the hand and lead him to the next booth. And every single exhibitor did that for him, and they filled out his treasure map.
Wow. Yeah.
That I didn't, and so I get to hear these things to know what's going on, and that's amazing. And I'm glad we have it on record. The one thing I do regret on that is we threw out the treasure maps. I wish I would have kept his and framed it. In the moment, I didn't think about it. But that was a miracle moment. The exhibit hall, what exhibit hall walks a guy down to the next exhibitor, and they all did it for him throughout, 40 different exhibitors. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm kind of that way too, where afterwards I like, that would have been great if I would have kept that. But in the moment, I'm not always great at, thinking through it. So,
right.
I can commiserate with you there.
Well, I've got to confess that I'm one of those recipients of Pay It Forward, because Tom Rossi from Buzzsprout actually gave me my first ticket to Podfest. And you now continually pay it forward. You look for people, or you create a fund to help people come to the event.
We have our attendees every year, and the ones that have done very well thanks to podcasting and just well in business, will buy 2 or 3 tickets, and then we will contribute 2 or 3 for every one they buy. So it creates a pay it forward fund, and literally we'll have 100 people each and every year now. And it all started with one attendee saying, Chris, I know you help a lot of people without telling anyone. Can I buy a ticket, and can you give it to someone, gift it to someone? And that was Gabe Aloisi. And I said, sure. And I announced it at one of my meetings. I said, hey, this is what Gabe did. I just want to highlight him. And Gabe's like, I don't need any highlight. I go, yeah, you know what, Gabe, but I would like to highlight you. And 5 other people said, we'd like to contribute as well. And then that started a program that has literally grown legs. And I think what's interesting is, Larry, we have a lot of people that they come. So there's 2 kinds of pay it forward people. People that have the money that want a free ticket to Podfest. And we understand that that's part of the game. But then there's people like, we literally have people like Jemmy Legenauer, who's a single mom who was laid off of the radio industry trying to find something new. And she's now built a business and has 3 employees because she was one of the first pay it forward recipients. So we do our best to look past the fact that there's people out there that they just don't want to buy a ticket. They want to try out the conference, because we know that we're getting a lot of times a veteran that's been wounded or needs help, or we don't know. And what happens is we wind up hearing these stories, and then those people come back the next year and buy a ticket and pay it forward. So it's been an amazing program, and we're just going to keep growing it because it's helped so many people.
I guess I owe you 3 tickets.
Yes, right.
No, I didn't say that for you, Larry. I want to be very clear, and Rocky, this in business and systems, we have people like, what if someone, could buy the pay it forward? That's not what it's about. So we don't mind that the different people come through, but we know that in letting, the people that apply and they say is that they want, or they come through different channels, it'll grow the community one way or another. And that's what's happened since we started it. So it's been amazing. It's been an amazing program.
So I had a question because Larry, of course, brought back your book, Start Ugly. And I'm always intrigued by people that take the time and the effort. I don't think people realize how long it can take. But what was the reasoning behind you writing a book? And is this your first book, or have you written other books?
I've written manuals, but I wouldn't say I didn't think I had anything worthy to say for a book until Start Ugly. So Start Ugly was a philosophy that I used to say in front of people that would say, well, what happened one time was I was very frustrated in front of a room, and they were like, we don't know how to do this, or they were coming up with excuses, and I kind of just yelled at them, just start ugly.
Yeah.
And I actually felt guilty, Rocky, when I said it, because I didn't say it in the nicest way. And then one person raised their hand. They said, "Can you tell us more about that start ugly thing?" Yeah. So it was one of those magical coincidences. So then I would use the word, and it actually resonated in people's subconscious that it's okay to start, and it's okay if it's ugly. So those two words kind of help. And I noticed that it was a really great learning aid. And my friend Gabe Aloisi, I had helped him. He has written like 3 or 4 books, and he got tired of me saying I was going to write the book. And what he did one day is I looked up on Facebook, and I was getting notifications. And Gabe basically posted on April 22nd. He says, "Congrats to Chris Krimitsos, who's releasing his book on August 8th. Let me know if you want an invite to the party." They had 40 likes and 26 comments.
Yeah.
I look at this and I call him up. He goes, "I hope you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's time for you to write this book."
Yeah. Well, I love the use of parables, and I think, even going back to biblical times, the use of parables to kind of catch people's attention, to teach them something that is very life-changing in a way that they readily accept. So was that your idea to kind of write the book in that format, or was it like, oh my gosh, I've got to come up with something now quickly because somebody, put it out there?
No, I had already been telling the story, so he was just like, get it on paper. And what I did was I created a story, I visualized it. It didn't take too long, and I wrote it down. And it wasn't, the first version of the story wasn't that great. One of the first feedbacks was from a friend of mine, and she literally said, this is what she wrote to me when I asked her for feedback. She goes, "First, please know that I love you." That's a bad sentence when I start.
Yeah.
But this is not good. On the plus side, you have that starting ugly thing down, which gives you something to work with. So she reminded me about the hero's journey, some basic writing things, especially for short stories and parables. And I changed it up, and I must have done 10 or 20. I did more drafts than anything. And then when the story was ready, I showed it to my brother. Now, my brother, he's not really involved in my business. He kind of knows what I do, but he doesn't really pay attention. He's a family relative, like anyone's family, right? So I gave him the book, and I said, read this. And I clocked him in at about 50 minutes. And it takes about anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour 15, depending how fast someone reads. And his feedback at the end of it was, "I don't know where you got this story, but you're going to get in trouble if you're copying stuff off the internet and putting it into a book." So that was the best feedback I could have got, because he couldn't believe that I wrote it. He thought they were real characters. He was looking up their Wikipedia pages. I said, "No, these are fictional characters." So that was the feedback I needed, that it was ready to go. And then we published a book, and it's about change. One of my favorite things is I deal with a lot of very successful CEOs. I'm part of a group called EO, and they do really big revenues, and they do really well. And I get to speak to my peers a lot. And they always say like, "Oh, I already started, I'm successful." And I go, "It's funny you should say that. This story that I have, Start Ugly, is about a very successful person that loses his way and needs a reminder of how to grow again." And the book just sells like hotcakes. And it's good for people just starting out too. But I was ready for the successful CEO to say, "I don't need that. I'm already successful." And that's ego talking. So we all have to start ugly and keep moving forward in different ways.
And stay ugly.
No, it's not start ugly, stay ugly. It's start ugly and perfectly execute.
Well, the amazing thing is, and even with, all that America and the world is going through right now with COVID-19, I've kind of used the book in that every day we're having to start ugly. We're every day the situation changes a little bit, and the restrictions change, and how we want to take care of our team and our community change. And so I think I was somebody who used a lot of excuses to not do things. And so I had kind of a wake up moment about 10 years ago. And this book kind of, reminds me that, hey,
it reinforces, yeah.
That's right. I mean, you don't have to have all the answers. In fact, you're probably never going to, but starting is action, even if it's not pretty. It's okay to start as long as hey, once we get going, we can get it to the point where it's beautiful. So I appreciate the book.
No, I appreciate it, Rocky. We're going to be releasing it in Kindle shortly, and I'm trying to figure out the Kindle madness to be able to give it away for free. They have different promotions, but my goal now is to, you're a business owner, and you guys understand this as creatives. There's a lot of people now, exactly what you just said, Rocky, that have been displaced from their jobs. They were forced into a Start Ugly situation. So my goal is to get the book, especially the Kindle, since I'll have days where I could give it away free, to as many hands as I can.
Yeah.
And then the people that could, part with $20, buy the physical book and I always tell them, buy the physical book and put it on your bookshelf so the words could be staring back at you. It'll improve your outlook, because you'll always be reminded we have to constantly be starting ugly at different things in our lives.
Where was it in the bookshelf here?
It was just staring right at us, actually. But what's amazing to me is we have a leadership team between the two stores of around, I would say 20 people that I would call like my top execs. But, we have a much longer, deeper bench, but the top 20 or so that I spend a lot of time with. And I've already given 5 or 6 of them a copy of this book. And what I love about it is, my life, I'm spending time with a lot of 18 to 25-year-olds who are incredibly brilliant, but they don't know it yet. And they're go-getters in general, but your book isn't 500 pages. It isn't overwhelming to them. It's a book that almost anybody can grab and kind of get engaged in the story. So I'm finding a lot of success with, several of them are coming back and saying, hey, I like this, or hey, I can even take this down to our next level, which is that 16-year-old kid. So, really, really well done. And I would encourage people to get it for any level, whether you're already a CEO or whether you're dealing with even school-age kids.
Yeah, we've had 8 to 10-year-olds read it, and they've enjoyed it. So what's interesting, the podcasting, Larry and Rocky, you'll appreciate this. We say this to podcasters all the time. They ask us, how long should my show be? As long as the content is good.
Yes.
So when I wrote this book, I said, okay, I'm not gonna create things to throw in there just so I could fill it up. So it could be 200-300 pages. It doesn't serve me or the reader anything. However, every word in this book will count from beginning to end. And that took a lot of effort to make sure even my bio marries back to what you read, the case studies after you read the short story, or the little, there's one page where it has 7 steps to starting ugly. That's our only how-to area, is one page that tells you exactly how to start ugly. So we didn't waste a word, and it clocked in at 99 pages, but it's a 1-hour read. If someone's really quick, it could be a 40-minute read. But that was my goal. And then we went above and beyond to make sure the design features in the physical hard copy are really one of a kind. So that way, when you have it in your hands, it's an experience. So I didn't make this book lightly. I'll be promoting it for the rest of my life. It's something that I looked at as, when my daughters look back, they'll say, hey, my dad created this to help a lot of people, and he did a phenomenal job. It's dedicated to them. And I'm really proud of what it is. And the case study is over 100 years old. So when we're talking about innovation and change, I give everybody an example that started in the 1900s. So there's no excuse to say, oh, this doesn't apply to me. If it applied back then, it applies even more so today.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, earlier you mentioned your wife started a podcast, and you said you had gotten into the business. What's happened with the family? Did it grow?
Yeah. So when you say family, the podcasting family, or
no,
so we have 2 daughters.
You personally, yeah. You personally.
We have 2 daughters. Yep. We have a 4-year-old named Sedona, who I was home with the daughters yesterday, so I had to discipline the 4-year-old. the part of parenting that is not the most fun, but it's the most necessary. So she and I had a heart-to-heart, and then I have a 1 1/4, I should say, Savannah. And Savannah, they're both miracle babies. On December 3rd, of 2019, my mother-in-law and I were delivering the baby in the house because we didn't make it out.
Oh
of
my
the house.
gosh. Jeez.
So it was the miracle delivery. So it was an experience she and my mother-in-law will never forget. But she said, it's very funny. My mother-in-law has a very good sense of humor. She goes, next time, if there is ever a next time, I'll be coming after the baby's born.
Well,
but she was amazing.
I have 3 daughters, much older, but I can tell you that get ready because you'll have continued heart to heart.
Oh my God! Yeah.
In fact, I noticed from your bio that you went to SUNY up in New York. Is that correct?
I went to Stony Brook University and I did a tour of a bunch, but I didn't go to the upstate ones. But yeah, I was in the SUNY system.
Yeah, my daughter is looking at one of their schools right now, actually, for her master's. So definitely a lot older than your kids, but the talks strangely don't change as much as we think they will.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had a nice conversation yesterday. It was it was nice. And I know Rocky, you'll resemble this, but after then, my wife talked to her and said, "Hey, you weren't really nice to Daddy," and this is kind of what happened. That night, she goes, "Daddy, I'm going to give you 4 kisses." So she felt bad, gave me 4 kisses for a good night. And as a father, it warms your heart, but
Yeah,
the roller coaster of emotions. Having to discipline a child, it's another muscle you build up.
Yes, for sure.
Chris, before we let you go, we've got to jump into our fun little segment of this or that. We think we learn a little bit more about our guests.
Yeah, so what we do here is we'll give you 2 things or 2 people, and we kind of ask which one you kind of gravitate more to and maybe a quick reason, maybe why. You are ready to play, or?
I'm ready.
All right, so the first one is Elon Musk or Richard Branson.
Oh, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
All day, every day. Richard, I like what he represents, but there's something about Elon Musk that speaks to my soul as an innovator, looking at the world and creating shortcuts. I think Richard Branson's an amazing business mind, but definitely Elon Musk all day long.
Well, and I think Elon has not been afraid to start ugly, in his own way, and yet he creates beautiful things.
Yeah, and I don't think Elon's not motivated by money. Money is a byproduct of what he does. Not saying Richard Branson's more of a traditional business guy, very futuristic, sees things, but Elon is a different breed. So I'm all in for Elon Musk.
We talk a lot about vision, mission statements, and I think Tesla has the best. Like when you're looking at a textbook, exactly what a mission versus vision is supposed to say, I think theirs is perfection, because it shows, like you said, it's not really about electric cars. It's really not about making money. It's really about a sustainable future. It's beautiful the way they've crafted it.
Not only that, it's when they ask him about why don't you patent the technology, he goes, "Good luck trying to keep up with me." It's like competition at its best, if that makes sense. Like, do your best. If you can keep up with me, then you should be, because we're revolutionizing the future together. So that kind of mission of abundance really speaks to me at a whole different level.
All right. Second would be Steve Jobs or Bill Gates.
Ooh, that's a tough one, because now Bill Gates has won a lot of brownie points in this last pandemic, because he called it before. Had you asked me a year ago, I'd say Steve Jobs all day long. I'd probably say Bill Gates, and I want to clarify this. I am fascinated by Steve Jobs, but he probably wasn't the nicest or easiest person to be around.
Right.
So if I were to hang out with someone, I think Bill Gates would be more giving, whereas Steve Jobs is very cut and dry. Even though I love both. At this point, especially after what just happened, I would say Bill Gates.
You know what's amazing to me about Bill Gates is I'm a big historical buff, huge into presidential elections and how people have gotten elected and so forth. And I look at Jimmy Carter, who a lot of people would count his presidency as a failure, but as you've looked back at it, it looks better and better because he seemed to do the right thing for the right reason. And as he's aged and you've seen this other side of him, people have fallen in love with Jimmy Carter as this philanthropist and caring human being. I think it's the same thing with Bill Gates.
Yeah, I would agree with you. He's changed. the way we view him actually has changed, but he's done a lot of good work for humanity. Now, I want to be very clear. I would rather meet Steve Jobs, but I'm going on the practicality. He's so, knowing him as well as because I've researched him a lot, I'd probably have a better time having dinner with Bill Gates because Steve Jobs, I think it would be one of those head scratchers like, man, that was Steve Jobs. Because Steve Jobs is such a unique character. So, but that's a good, great pairing.
All right. So we only have two more. The next one would be Steven Spielberg or Walt Disney.
Probably Walt Disney, because he was more. Spielberg was a filmmaker who turned entrepreneur. Walt Disney was an entrepreneur who always had a vision for the future, and he revolutionized everything he touched. So I would definitely go Walt.
All right. And then the last one, and I asked this for my daughters. They are huge fans of a certain genre of music, but do you prefer Broadway or rock and roll?
I like both, but if I had to pick, probably rock and roll.
Yeah, we're kind of running that. That's about 75%. But my daughters, I know way too much about Broadway because my daughters are so into it. So I have to ask that question.
Yeah, if you need,
I took Broadway lit class in my high school, so we studied musicals, and we'd go see Miss Saigon. I went to a very well-to-do high school in Long Island, New York, and we literally had that as an elective. So I wound up learning all these show tunes.
Right. Yeah.
So it's its own genre. What's the thing with Hugh Jackman? That movie he did where The Greatest Showman.
Great Showman. Yeah.
I can't wait for that. If that hits Broadway, I'll be lined up to buy tickets for that because that was probably one of the greatest musicals. We were in the movie theater and everybody gave it a standing ovation. I've never had that happen before. That was an amazing piece.
That's a pretty cool thing for sure. It's amazing to me about Broadway is I joke and say my daughters have dragged me into it, but I have way too many show tunes on my phone now. I can tell you really get into it, and I think what I'm attracted to it is just like you've said it several times. The story arc, a great story is a great story, no matter whether it's sung or whether it's spoken. And Broadway has some just truly amazing stories.
Have you seen Hamilton?
Yeah, I have. It is
it is okay. So it lives up to all the hype. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm a history nerd, and I'm okay with little tweaks, mistakes on purpose to tell the story a little bit better. I don't get fixated on that, but no, it's truly a great. Although I'll tell you the one that, as far as emotionally hitting you and meaning a lot in a society like today is Dear Evan Hansen. It's an amazing show, really well written.
Dear Evan Hansen, I just wrote it down. Awesome.
So if you get to New York, check it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I have
Long Island,
come on. I'm up there. Yeah, I'm up there quite a bit. So, the greatest play I ever saw was off Broadway during my Broadway high school days, or even younger. We saw On Borrowed Time.
Oh wow!
Which was Theater in the Round, and that was with the gentleman that played Patton, the Oscar winner.
Yeah, I'm blanking, but I know
George F.C. Scott or something like that. Is that the name? He was one of the most amazing actors I've ever seen, and it was him and a young kid playing his grandson, and there was no props, no nothing. And think about this: you have 1,000 kids from all these high schools lined up, and they captivated us for an hour and a half. You could hear a pin drop, and there was no production, no nothing. It was just like a little tree in a theater in the round, and that changed the way I look at Broadway because it was an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah, well, and I think it's always amazing. Dear Evan Hansen, the best part in the entire show is the stage. So the stage actually becomes another actor.
Interesting.
It truly captures how we can feel so out of control in a world where social media is constantly coming at you, and we have this fire hose approach to media getting so much, and how it kind of messes with your anxieties and so forth. So I would agree. I've seen those plays where it's one person and it captivates you and it's nothing else, and then I take it to Dear Evan Hansen where the stage itself is such an impressive actor. If it could win an award, I'd vote for it. So
There's the amazingness of Broadway. It could be all these different things. So thank you for mentioning that. I'm gonna, my wife and I, once these things blow over, if we could get tickets to it and still going on, we're gonna go check it out.
Well, Chris, I really want to thank you for being on the show today, and even more, I want to thank you for helping people find their voice and their message. I think a lot of people like us, we were unsure the steps to take, and so it's been really great to get to know you today and to be a beneficiary of all you've helped start.
Well, thanks to you, Rocky and Larry. Thank you, both of you. You guys are members of our community. We appreciate all that you do, and paying it forward and helping the next generation of content creator. Because as we all know, there's a lot of other voices waiting for their audience, and we're here to help them.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming today, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Well, we want to really thank Chris for coming out today and for spending some time with us in the underground bunker. He was truly an amazing guest, and we hope you guys got a lot of information.
And we hope to see you at Podfest next year.
That's right, yeah.
I'll plug that. And his book. You've got his book?
I do. I have his book. It's fantastic. Start Ugly. And it's good really for any age, and even if you're grizzled old veterans like Larry and I.
Again, I'd like to suggest if you need help with your website, go to ACS Creative. They don't play games with your money. We want to thank them for helping us. Hey, thanks for linking up with us here on A Server's Journey. If this is your first time with us, remember to subscribe to the podcast. We're on all those major podcast servers, so you can do it anytime. So, Rocky, until next time, I am your ever faithful companion, Larry.
Larry, thank you so much for being by my side, and we want to thank everybody for coming along on this journey. We think this is important, and at the end of the day, we want to know, are you somebody worth following? I'm Rocky DeStefano, and thanks for joining us.